Can I flip something and ask you a question here real quick?
Of course.
On this.
100%.
When you're talking about inflexibility, and then I kind of it kind of led me down my own personal like wormhole of ways that I've been rejected deals. So like when I'm actively like going out and like pursuing deals and somebody else seems like they're being inflexible, the main like hurdles that I've had to kind of jump over. How do you combat the responses of, well, I don't want to make your team better because your team is already like really, really good. I don't want to make your team better. And then the other one that I run into, especially because most people in my leagues like know that I'm a content creator. Well, if you're interested in this guy, obviously there has to be a
reason
why.
Yeah.
There's some sort of secret with him, right? You saw a beat reporter, you saw something. How do you address those two different hurdles in response to trades that you're trying to get done?
Welcome to South Harmon.
What's going on, shitheads? Welcome back in to the South Harmon Dynasty Fantasy Football channel. Today, I am joined by Addison Hayes. Addison, been looking forward to doing a collab with you here for a little while. Appreciate you hopping on. How are you today, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing well, man. Appreciate it for asking me to come on here. I'm pretty excited. I've been a fan of your content and your work on multiple channels now for quite some time, so I'm glad that we're able to chop it up now together and run it.
Absolutely, man. It's gonna be fun. I've seen Addison all over the place too. DLF, he's doing stuff with 4for4. Make sure you're checking out both of those channels. Addison, I'm curious. We're gonna get into talking a little bit about trading here for you. For me, trading is probably my favorite specific part of the game of Dynasty, honestly. Talking about trades, trying to get trades done, it can be frustrating at times, depending on who's on the other side, for sure. But for you specifically, is there anything when it comes to trading in the game of Dynasty that sticks out or stands out to you, or things that you like to do when you go to make trades in Dynasty?
Yeah. First of all, absolutely, that trading is the best part of Dynasty. It's the one. There's only two ways. I say this all the time. There's only two ways to improve your Dynasty roster, and it's either through rookie drafts by drafting the incoming rookies, hoping that they hit, or by trading. So with that essential aspect of Dynasty, it kind of has to be something that you have to fall in love with, or at least be conscious of being able to do to actually improve your Dynasty roster and then build an actual Dynasty and win championships. So I just love the trading aspect just in general. I love trading for future picks. I love trading down at different positions, especially trading down at the running back position. I like trading up at the wide receiver position. It kind of just feeds into my roster construction strategy. So it's just anything and everything that has to do with trading, I feel like is just something that is the best part of Dynasty fantasy football,
Absolutely. Well, we share the same sentiment on that as far as trading. I think I find as well that a lot of times the leagues I am most drawn to typically have the most activity in trading. And I think the reality too is part of that is just the people in the league and how active it becomes. But for me, I think one of the things that I've wanted to talk about and am curious, I think there's not really a right or wrong answer here on this, but I think getting people's feelings and thoughts on the matter, because it's not really something I hear discussed a lot. And that basically is the psychology aspect of trading, or how do you actually go about getting trades done per se, right? What are some things that you do to get trades done? And for me, one of the things I try and do, and I think I see, I wish other people did a little more as well, is you get trades come into you, right? And we all have been probably on the receiving end of plenty of trades where you're like, well, there's definitely no thought process in here other than whatever they're getting is way better than what I'm getting.
Absolutely.
And for me, I try to look at the other person's team and think, at least when I'm sending out offers, what kind of a situation is their team in? What are some trades that they've made in the past? And I try to build out a trade that, at least from the starting ground, is going to get us off to a good discussion and rapport. I'm curious for you whether it is, let's just stick with outgoing right now for offers that you're getting ready to send. Do you have any specific thoughts or strategies that you try to do when you're getting ready to put a offer out to someone?
Yeah, it is definitely that you have to kind of craft a trade where you're coming into it where both teams should be benefiting from that deal. And the best trade partners are the ones where, hey, I really need a running back. you have a boatload of running backs. You really need a wide receiver. I have a boatload of wide receivers. Let's, kind of talk it out, make something happen here to where both of our teams can benefit. And, we're both happy with the deal at the very end of it. Or you can get into the circumstances where both people hate the deal that they made. And so those are the two kind of funny trade situations at the end, where either both people are super happy or both people aren't too happy. And those are probably the biggest indicators of like a fair trade on both sides. But at least being able to, going through every team, every roster, seeing what you're trying to buy. If it's an actual specific player, then you're only really down to just whatever roster has that one specific player. But if you're looking for a type of player, which is kind of how I encourage trading for something like, hey, I need an RB2. Well, make a list of the RB2s that you want, then go out and see, which teams have those running backs, and then try to see if you can narrow down from there which rosters are actually the best fit for you then to trade with and accept whatever it is that you're trying to trade away. If they're rebuilding, but they want to shed some age, you give them some draft picks. If they need a wide receiver, give them a wide receiver. Need a tight end. That's kind of how I initially start my process of identifying and starting a trade, is identifying which players I'm going after, or the type of player that I'm going after. Now, who has those players, and then of those rosters, which of them actually fit a deal that I'm trying to craft with the assets that I'm able to then trade away for that player coming back.
I like hearing that, and I like that thought process, and just thinking about that, reiterating a little bit what I'm hearing too. The idea, I think, there where you're actually looking across rosters for the best trade partner before actually making the trade. I think a lot of times what I get questions on will be more so, hey, I want this player. How do I get that player? Well, I think if you go about it from that standpoint, right, thinking about what Addison just said, kind of, taking a step out to think about using the same type of an idea you did, right? You're looking for the best trade partner. Now, let's say if you are looking for a specific player, well, if you want this player, I think it's important to know that if I'm going to send out an offer to them, like, to get the thing started at the right, on the right foot, I should say. Well, what do they need on their team? Basically, if I'm looking for a player off of your team and I'm not thinking about how is this going to be a trade that benefits you, you're just kind of sending out a bunch of blank shots and you're hoping something will stick, right? So if you're looking for a player off of their team, thinking about their team, okay, what position is it in? Does it look young? Does it look like it's in a situation of a rebuild, or is this someone that's completely a contender? And at that point, if you can try to identify that, or at least have a discussion about that, you might be able to put together an offer which makes more sense for them, right, based on their build. Just saying, hey, I want for a running back too, let's say, hey, I want Joe Mixon. I think right now he's real cheap at the moment, and I think I can get him cheap off their roster. And you send them something back that you feel like makes sense in current value, but without thinking about their team, what are we really doing here?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is, I think, the biggest mistake that a lot of people make when they're starting to get, trying to get deals done. And then if they're saying, well, I'm never able to trade this player away, or I'm never able to trade for or buy this other player, or just get deals done in general. I think it all, mainly the initial issue is, are you trying to craft out a deal where both teams actually benefit, or are you trying to just come in and be like, I got to win the deal. I got to win the deal. I got to win the deal. No matter what it is, I'm using this trade calculator. It says that you're off by, the 3.03. So you got to give me your third round pick or something like that, or this extra thing. But if you just are able to craft a deal where both teams end up winning, that is the best way to get an actual deal done. It's kind of like, I think of it this way, where, if you're playing golf, I've been getting really into golf over the past couple of years, and everybody always says,
Love
if you
to
want to
hear
get
that.
better at golf, it's so frustrating, but it's so much fun.
Yeah.
But everybody always says, if you want to get better at golf and shoot lower scores, like, stop going for the pin on every single green. Like, you gotta, if you just aim for the green, give yourself, a 20 to 30 foot target instead of a 2-foot target. You're going to hit way more greens. You're going to, two putt a lot more, make a lot more pars, reduce the number of bogeys, double bogeys, all that kind of stuff. And maybe if you hit, a really good strike, you can get within, 3 to 5 feet and come out of there with a very clean birdie. And I kind of think that trading is kind of the exact same way, where if you're able to craft out an actual offer that seems like it could benefit both teams, And maybe it's not exactly 100% deal, like sure, maybe if you're trying to buy like a Joe Mixon or a David Montgomery, maybe the value is like 2 seconds, but you only really have the 207 and you just send them the 2.07 for that Joe Mixon or that David Montgomery or whatever it is. And they say no, they need a little bit more, but at least got the conversation going and you didn't insult them with an initial offer to where they're no longer willing to actually trade with you or even talk to you. And maybe even sometimes somebody says, hey, I'll just do that deal right now. You give me the 2.07 for Joe Mixon and bada bing, bada boom, you're good to go. So I think, taking that kind of golf approach where if you give yourself a bigger target, you're able to land a lot more shots. And then, you can move on with better discussions from there, get a deal actually done. Or sometimes, something just actually really goes your way and you're able to just get something done that you thought was at a good value, but then they were also happy with too.
Yeah, I like. Well, by the way, I definitely share the same golf thing as well. I lately have not been able to play as much as time has been tough for me. But man, golf to me is the most challenging yet most fun game out there. Maybe aside from the game of Dynasty. But when you bring up that approach, it got me kind of thinking as well. Something that I've been thinking a little stronger on, and that is when I think a lot of people are trying to make a deal, right? Going back to thinking about, hey, I'm trying to acquire this player. Most people are looking at their team, right? And they're looking at their roster. And you talked about roster construction. And I think it's a more discussed point, an emphasized point in the game of Dynasty. Like as the game of Dynasty becomes more and more played, I think the average person is getting sharper. And the reason I say that is I think sometimes people get so fixated on their current roster and their current roster construction that it makes trading become a lot more inflexible in a way, right? So you're trying to upgrade a position, let's say. Well, that may very well be exactly what the person you're trying to trade with is also trying to do. And I think sometimes when you talk about, trying to hit that pin shot, right? You're trying to put it so close to the pin. You're putting so much stress on this specific trade. And probably to your point, you're wanting to win every single trade. Well, one of the things for me that I'm finding that I've been having to do, especially when I'm trying to continue to make more trades in volume, is sometimes be able to and be comfortable going away from my roster construction, understanding that I will be able to get back to it at some point, or that now in a future trade I can make a different deal to get back to my roster construction. And why I think that's important is this specific topic for me is if I'm in a discussion, let's say Addison and I are in a discussion, right? You brought up, like, let's just use the Montgomery scenario here. Okay. So let's say I'm trying to get David Montgomery from your roster. I'm sending out like a 207. And let's say you say back to me, hey, if you had something in like a late second range as well, I might be able to part with him here. But let's say for whatever reason, I don't have the asset at the moment that you're looking for. A lot of times I feel, and I've had confirmation from people asking questions. Now they get frustrated. It's almost like blue balls in a way, right? Now you feel like you started something and nothing's going to get done. I don't have a finished trade. Well, you can get really upset about that if you want to, and I can certainly understand that. But to me, if I'm looking for two things every time I am in trade discussions, a trade to get done would be obviously one and the most optimal. But in the event that I'm not, I want to leave every single trade with information. So at least there, I think the point would be to execute a trade later. I know, hey, in this type of a trade, if I want to go get this player from Addison or a player archetype like this is kind of what he's let me know the value would be, right? Maybe there's another scenario out there now where, okay, to complete this trade with Addison, I need a late second or an early third or something like that in value. Maybe I could make a trade to get that piece, and I now have what he's looking for, right? I might be able to come back after a different trade. Just because you don't have it on your roster at the current moment, I feel like people will end up walking away from a trade saying, oh, Addison's unreasonable. Well, that may not be the case at all. You just may not have the perfect assets right now. But remember, if you continue to make trades, you can probably come back and have a different discussion with Addison in the future.
I love that idea of every time that you talk to somebody or every time that you do a deal or even every time that a deal gets done in your league that's not involving you, there's always information to be learned from, all of those different things going on at once. It's like that Dynasty Notebook idea that I think it's Leo Siga, I think was his name, on Twitter, that he always preaches about having Yeah, or it's Leo P, but it's Siga_FF. Always talks about trying to have like a dynasty notebook. I think he takes it literally and like has like an actual notebook for every single league that he will write down information that he learned. So then that way, it's like you start seeing these patterns that this guy, every single year, whenever new first round picks get added in, that this person always trades away their first round pick in like February or March because they're wanting to keep rebuild or keep competing. This guy really goes for wide receivers. This guy really goes for quarterbacks. This guy, really goes for his favorite team, who the Seattle Seahawks or whatever, that you find value in all of those different kinds of deals. And then, yeah, it makes you being a smarter and also better trader in future deals. So I like that idea that every single transaction in your league, whether or not you're involved, is something to be learned, or there is something to be learned, or even if a deal doesn't get done. And like you said, like, hey, this is where we're at on David Montgomery. You don't have the assets for it right now, but if you do, later on down the road, that could be something that you can come back to. So I am fully endorsing on that kind of a deal. You don't got to go as far as to actually have a notebook like Leo does, but some sort of something like that where you can keep it in the back of your mind for all conversations or anything like that, and it makes you a better trader because then you're more understanding of what other people are looking for, or weigh a little bit more or weigh less, and all those circumstances.
100%, man. It's interesting because I actually have kept a notebook before. I've done that, and I'm at the point now where I'm in 18 leagues. I actually cut back, and part of the reason I cut back was because, listen, I don't have a notebook any longer on 18 leagues. I'm not gonna say that, but having the ideas of certain notes on certain conversations is something I do like to have. And basically, when I get to too high of a league number, it's really hard for me to keep track and actually be as active as I'd like to, the way I like to play and trade in all the different leagues. I think when you brought up that point, it actually just made me think about this as well. That let's say you're in that same discussion, right? Addison and I are talking Montgomery here. A lot of times, and I will say this, there are definitely in certain teams, certain league types, based on the scoring, based on how many starters there are, whatever the case may be, where I have a player that I'm not going to necessarily say unmovable, but I'm much less flexible in trading away, right? But I try to be as flexible as humanly possible in all my different leagues with the players I'll trade, and trying to have some sort of an idea of what I'm looking for in return. Because a lot of times what can happen for me, right? I think this is where trades end up getting done a little more often for myself. Maybe I go in and I ask, all right, I'm looking for David Montgomery off of your roster. Well, let's say we don't end up getting that done. I don't have the assets to get, David Montgomery from you that you would like. A lot of times the conversation can pivot and evolve into, well, you're looking for this type of a player, right? Maybe it's not these 2 seconds any longer. Maybe you discuss now, hey, you know what about Jordan Addison? Speaking of Addison, maybe Addison's like, hey, I want some Addison on my team, right? What about Jordan Addison from you? Okay, now if I go into that, maybe if I'm going to trade Jordan Addison, I don't actually have to get David Montgomery in the trade. Maybe I want to pivot that out. But thinking about, okay, if you want Jordan Addison, now I have an idea, right? You've asked for a specific player on my team, right? That's something that if you were to be thinking about this in trades with your league mates, hey, it's Jordan Addison guy, right? Or he's interested in Jordan Addison.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you tell me you're interested in a receiver upgrade, maybe not a specifically Jordan Addison, but hey, this is something that I would like to get from my team as well. Maybe this is a quarterback, let's say. So let's say you're in a super flex league, interested in a quarterback on my team, but I only have 2. This would be a good discussion about the roster construction idea. If I am thinking about roster construction, I'd probably like to get to 3. So if you're asking for a quarterback off of my squad, and I only have 2, I'm going to be super inflexible about that, right? Like I'm not going to be able to move that to you.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe down the road, you're able to acquire another quarterback. And maybe down the road, you're able to come back to the table on a discussion that happened in the past. I think those are some things for me that I try and think about, especially if there's a team that I have a lot of attention needing to, right? And I'm trying to get multiple deals done in order to get it to the point that I think it's going to be much better in contention. Because to your point earlier, a lot of times the only ways to really improve are going to be through the rookie draft, like hitting, home runs and hitting really good shots in the rookie draft, or making trades.
Can I Can I flip something and ask you a question here real quick
course.
on this?
100%.
When you're talking about inflexibility, and then I kind of it kind of led me down my own personal like wormhole
Yeah.
of ways that I've been rejected deals. So like when I'm actively like going out and like pursuing deals and somebody else seems like they're being inflexible, the main arguments that I've found my uh or main like hurdles that I've had to kind of jump over. And maybe this is a testament to just how good of a dynasty manager I am, because I'm phenomenal and I win all the time and make these awesome rosters. But
Yeah.
How do you combat the responses of, well, I don't want to make your team better because your team is already like really, really good. I don't want to make your team better and then can help contribute to a super team here. Or it's the other one that I run into, especially because most people in my leagues like know that I'm a content creator and they know that I'm on top of this stuff. Well, if you're interested in this guy, obviously there has to be a reason why.
Yeah.
There's some sort of secret with him, right? You saw a beat reporter, you saw something. How do you address those two different hurdles in response to trades that you're trying to get done?
Man. Well, the question, I love the question, and I will admit honesty to you here. It's a newer, by the day, becoming a more of a hurdle that I have to face as well, right? It's actually funny. I remember before I was really making much content, that was pretty new, like my first year making content. I was talking with somebody about how, well, I'm always going to draft for value and trade for need later. And a person creates a lot of content and told me basically like, well, I do think that same and have that same feeling, but it isn't always necessarily as easy for me because people think I have some kind of angle. I remember thinking like, I don't know about that. Well, here we are all these couple years later, and I very much face some of the same things. I will say this: if I find that I'm in the spot where the person is basically saying they're trying to freeze me out of trades, or they are trying to, kind of count my pockets in a way, right? Like your team's too good, I can't make a trade with you. There are specifically 100% scenarios where maybe this is not the best trade partner for me. I'm not going to say that that doesn't happen. So maybe I'm better off, trying to make my first trade or another trade somewhere else. But I do think, at least for me, I found that in the off season, those things can become a lot more problematic because there's nothing going on. I feel like a lot of times those type of managers, I don't want to say put on ice, but I kind of will put on ice in a way. And when the season comes around, variance, bye weeks, injuries, all of a sudden the specific timing, I think, is important to remember with these type of people, because at the end of the day, they're going to be wanting to make a trade when something happens to their team, their roster, and that feeling may still be there, but they may say, well, man, Addison has all these players and I'm trying to still contend at, in October when I'm dealing with a couple bye weeks. And unfortunately, like last year, you had Nico Collins, and every wide receiver in the world, it felt like, went down last year. So I would say, at least for me, I found that sometimes that's a signal for me, like this is not the right time. I need to move on at the moment and maybe try and come back to this a little bit later. But I will say that it's a very interesting one. And when I'm looking at that type of a feedback, what I'm basically hearing is I'm not going to make a trade with you right now. And sometimes I think it's okay to say, all right, listen, that we're too close to this situation here. I'm going to move back at the moment. But hey, I can at least know going in that, like, if I ask for a specific player from you, it's going to be a problem. I will say the last piece that I think is the final tie-in here. If I know that's the case, I don't want to keep going to the table and almost like hit the like button, the love button on a player for them. Like now they're going to see that as, oh, Adam wants to get Jordan Addison. Let's say we're using the same example. But if the conversation kind of goes where they're dictating it, I feel like that's what ends up happening where it's successful for me. Is now if somewhere in the conversation they pivot and ask for this player, and I'm willing to bring this player to a discussion, it almost feels like they're being a little bit more in control or manipulating the deal. That's been typically my biggest way to get over that hurdle, if that makes sense.
That is a really good angle that I don't think because I feel like every time whenever I'm in trade talks, I do feel like I am the one that is a little bit more gearing the conversation
The
and a little bit
initiator.
more in
Yeah.
control. And it does Yeah, now that you say that, I think that that's a really good piece of advice. Where could you try to flip it to where they feel like they're the ones that are driving the trade talks, and they're bringing up the players. They're the one, saying like, "Hey, would you do? I know you're interested in this guy. What about if we kind of worked a deal out where you gave me him, and I'll give you this guy and this pick, or something like that." And they're the one you kind of switch it to where they're the ones that feel like they are in control and guiding that along. I think that's a really good uh, way to flip the script on them.
Yeah, I think that is, at least for me, that's been one way I found. I will
Yeah.
say another thing I like to try and do when I get that piece of information, now that I'm thinking about it too a little longer. Sometimes this is where I think it's in the game of Dynasty it's kind of interesting in a lot of different ways. But when I think about the game in its like root elementary form, let's say it's a 12-team league. That means that myself and 11 other people are kind of agreeing we're going to play in a league for the rest of our fantasy football days ahead, right? And the reason I think that's important to think about, excuse me, is when we're dealing with that type of a situation, a lot of people may come and they're trying to get one huge win in a trade, right? They're looking for this
Mhm.
crazy win in a trade. They send out a bunch of spam, bad offers, but it only takes one or two, right? Accepting all of a sudden they got this huge win and their team's in this great spot. But the problem for me with where I don't like to do that too often, and I'm not going to sit here and tell me if you send me a really great trade for myself, I'm going to hit the accept button, right? I'm not
Mhm.
telling you I'm not going to do that, but I'm not coming out and trying to like basically get over on my league mates, because what I want to try to do is build a bunch of good rapport in trading with people so that that type of feeling is not there. Now, it very well can come about, right? But it sometimes I think even making a trade where you feel like it's not exactly what you're looking for, but it's close enough in value. Sometimes I'm looking to almost be uh, someone that wants to trade in volume so much to where I'll make a trade that's close just to keep the rapport going and just to
Oh,
keep you feeling like, okay, you know what, this guy he's not quite as unreasonable as I made him out to be, right? I'm trying to keep those bridges there so that in the event that in the future I have a bunch. Let's say this opposite scenario happens, right? And bye weeks and injuries, my team's just getting crushed. Okay, well, if I go to Addison, I'd like to have some good trade rapport in the past so that we can have a good discussion. Because a lot of times when you're making those type of trade offers and you're not getting deals done, and you get further and further from a trade, now you're further from a trade when you go to make a new one in the future.
I was actually you. It's almost like you read my mind. I was literally going to ask you if you ever make value loss deals. Not like I'm saying like, I purposely sent my first round pick to go get Cooper Cup. So this guy and everybody in the league knows that sometimes I just make really bad deals. But it's more like, those kind of things where, you're looking at this trade offer, you're like, man, I feel like I should be getting more. I think I'm leaving some meat on the bone on this one, but this is just where we're at, and I think I'm just going to hit accept because I think it is going to make my team better. Maybe not as much better as I necessarily thought it would be. It's definitely going to make this other guy very happy, and it's going to continue that relationship down the road. So that maybe, yeah, I'm losing this deal. If you put it up on Twitter, I'm losing the deals 40-60, but you know I could potentially gain rapport or relationship status with this guy, or maybe other people in the league if they see Addison made this deal. Maybe I can kind of come in and make a similar deal with him, and then that gets more trade talks done, more actual deals done, and maybe you're not improving your roster by that one single deal, but by the relationship and the rapport that you are gaining, you are improving your roster, like you said, over volume through time, by making deals that maybe that 40-60 deal for you leads you to them making a 60-40 deal with somebody else or that other guy in the future, or maybe it's 55-45 or anything kind of like that. So, and as long as it's not hurting your actual roster, and like I said, you're not making like an actual bad deal, a slight value loss, I don't think is a negative, especially if both teams are still benefiting from that deal. It's just maybe you're not benefiting as much as you necessarily would have liked.
100%. I think too with that, right? There's going to be some hard lines that I maybe will draw, and it might be like if it's a player that I'm really valuing highly, right? Like cornerstone type assets. Maybe that is a specific example where I'm not going to make a trade that I feel like I'm potentially slightly losing on.
Sure.
But I do think though that it is important to remember, maybe is that would be like a caveat. But like let's say in this scenario, you're talking about a trade where I think it's close in value. It's close enough. Maybe I think it's off by, a third or something light. And I went ahead and make the deal. I think especially like right now is in the summer, right? Is a really interesting time in Dynasty because things at the moment, basically as soon as the Super Bowl is over, there's literally nothing actually happening in the game of football that's actually moving the goalpost, so to speak, on these player values. Like, sure, there's the rookie draft, right? There's,
There's
incoming. Right, exactly. There's a few different things, but a lot of players, the overarching sentiment and the value can kind of stay in a similar range, right? Maybe players around them are moving up and down, but they're kind of cemented in value. And I think it's important to remember that, okay, if I make this trade with Addison, let's just say that, again, it's a trade where, in theory, it seems like I'm losing by slightly a third. But you got to remember, we're judging that based on the values at the moment. So part of the reason I'm okay doing that, if it's helping me get better rapport with this manager or getting my team closer to where I want it to go as far as roster construction, like in October, there's an extremely good chance that the player values for almost everybody in the deal, right, are going to move some. And one of the things, though, I will have some very strong player takes, and I think I do know what I'm talking about. I will tell you factually that there are plenty of times my takes are very wrong and building in variance to both sides where, okay, at the time, I got a deal done with this manager, and I think we're going to be in a better position in the future to make another deal. Like, those are deals that I'm kind of more willing to make because I'm basically baking in the variance on the other side as well. And whether I end up winning or losing this deal as time goes on, to me, I'm looking to probably win, I would say, roughly 60% of my deals. And I think by and large, I'll make enough deals if I can make volume moves to where I am in a 60% range of winning. But if I'm making 1, 2, 3 trades throughout the year, that means that when I look back at the variance, there's a good chance that no matter how great I thought the trades were or weren't, that I look back and I was dead wrong. And that's, I think, one of the things that's under talked about and looked at for me. If I'm only making 1 or 2 trades, now all that variance that is going to play in hugely, and I have no control over it, frankly.
I think one thing, whenever you say that, sometimes I'm just dead wrong, a lot of people I think can spin that negatively. Like I really bought into this guy and I was just dead wrong. But then there are also the other times where, I think the value makes sense. I'm not really in on this guy, but some other people are, and I could still see the path, even though I don't necessarily believe that that path is going to work out. But then it actually does work out, and you're wrong positively.
Sure, 100%.
for your value. So that can still happen as well. I do think, it is more common. I think a lot of people just remember the times that they were wrong where they actually just swung and missed. But then I think that there are still just enough of an example where you could be wrong, but it was actually a benefit for you to have been wrong in that scenario. So, that's why, like, people that have that portfolio dynasty, they have like 40, 50 dynasty leagues or whatever. And they're just like, I want exposure on all these different guys. Cause I didn't love Jameson Williams coming in, but I want a Jameson Williams share here. I want a Jameson Williams share there. Cause what if I am wrong? And chances are there probably is decent odds that I am wrong, or at least wrong enough to where that wasn't actually a bad pick, or that was a better pick than maybe the guy that I was in on, or something like that.
Sure.
There's all those different circumstances too, to where it is, it can be beneficial to have been wrong on a player.
No, for sure. I think to your point you just made, right? It's if I'm buying in on a player, I'll give you a big L case from back in the day where I was really in on Cam Akers, right? So obviously, when you look, every time I'm trying to acquire more Cam Akers, and I have a Cam Akers share now that just looks like terrible, or whether I kept it or not the entire time, kind of irrelevant, right? It's a bad take. I think just as much on the other side, where if you're trying to almost get more middle ground with your exposures, at the same point, every time I took Cam Akers, there's another part of the deal where I could have drafted another running back or another player going in that range, right? So the opportunity cost that when you're really loading up on players that you're extremely in on, they can hit. But if you were to just take a step back again and say, all right, well, I don't really have any like another L take, but I'm just thinking the guys in the second round range when Cam was really high there, like DeAndre Swift, who ended up also taking a nosedive. But there's other players there where you could have tried to, basically in a portfolio aspect, made sure, all right, I'm not the highest on this player, but if I'm wrong, what's going to happen? I think that's definitely something I've learned from, and I do still have really bullish takes and bullish players that I want to go buy, but there's plenty of times where I think that same point with trading, right? You're if you go into it trying to buy, let's say you say, all right, I want to go buy whatever Jordan Addison, we'll just use for the sake case and sake. If I go to someone and I can't get Jordan Addison off of their roster, you may be like, all right, I couldn't make that happen. I think it's just as important on both sides of this with trading as well. Well, what are some players that you value similarly to Jordan Addison? What are some other bets that you could make that are kind of in the same range? Who has those players? Like maybe you go to those type of managers and you'll find that it's way more reasonable, or the price is not nearly as high as Jordan Addison. Or maybe it's even more strategic than that. Maybe you're like, well, I need a receiver and I don't really have the funds, so to speak, right? I'm kind of on a budget. I'm not liquid enough to go get Jordan Addison. Well, who's a player that you could try to get at the receiver position that you don't view as high as Addison, but might be able to give you similar replacement value at the position, right? So those are some things I think when you're in trades as well to think about. Just because you want to go get this player, it may not happen. The person that has Jordan Addison might be extremely high on him too, and you need to figure out a different pivot to make a trade that is beneficial for your team.
Right. That's where it kind of goes back to my personal strategy is I just like to find types of players. Like I'm not going to try and actively go out. I mean, there are times where, we all love certain players. We all, maybe don't like some other certain players. So it is more fun. And there are times where you just like, I have this guy in every single league because I just love this dude, or maybe the value is just really good on this guy. But generally, I think it is just like, I'm just a fan. I want him on every single one of my teams. I believe in him. I'm going to go out. I'm just going to buy him everywhere. But if that's not necessarily the case, and you're like, I'm really in on a Jordan Addison, but the Jordan Addison guys just happens to be higher, or the price is a little bit too expensive for assets that I just don't have. And then that's where you identify types of players where you go, all right, well, what's actually is Jordan Addison's production? He's been like a solid top 24 wide receiver. Could I get top 30 wide receiver production that's maybe a few tenths of a point per game behind him, but at significantly cheaper prices? Can I go get, Khalil Shakir or Juwan Jennings or Calvin Ridley or, whoever you project to kind of be in that production range? That's why I like going after a type of player. I like to fill voids in my roster with a certain type of player. And then whoever it ends up being the cheapest is usually the guy that I'm going to go after. That's usually how I like to answer a lot of questions that people ask me. They're like, hey, who should I go target? Who should I go buy another like tight end or something like that? And then who would you go buy it? I'd be like, listen, if you want a tight end and you just want a cheap producer guy, I would go to the Jonnu Smith manager. I'd go to the Evan Ingram manager. I would go to the Mark Andrews manager. I would go to the Jake Ferguson manager, we'll just say. And then whoever ends up being the cheapest, that's the guy that you buy. And they're like, well, do you care about any of the guys in between? Like if they all said yes, at the same price point, then who is the guy that you would go after? I'd be like, well, then that's just a preference point. But if there are differences, like this guy he'll give you him for a late second, but this guy will give you him for a late third. I'm going to pay the late third one before I'm paying the other second round pick one or anything like that. So it's a type of player, not necessarily the player itself.
Man, that's actually it's interesting because that's like the flip side or the opposite side of the same point. This I fully agree and endorse, which is I kind of call it diligence, right, with trading. So the scenario Addison just brought up, I'm going to give you, I think, the exact same thing in a trade that I made very recently. So I'll give you a team. It's Invade the Fetal is the league. Okay, it's a 12 team start 10 Superflex league. It's a BDGE league, right? So in this league, I really like my team, and I'll actually pull up the team on the lab so you guys can get the full context of it. I'll read you the team, but Addison, this team for me was one I missed the playoffs in 2023, right? And in the 2024 offseason, right, I was really diligent about trying to make and improve my team to make it into the playoffs, which I did. But Unfortunately, I ended up losing in the semi, so I knew I still had some work to do. I like the team, but I will tell you when I'm looking about the team, the one thing that's kind of a glaring hole to me is my running back 2 spot. And, I was trying to improve it during the rookie draft, like you talked about. There was RJ Harvey kept falling, and I kept trying to trade up. It's funny because he would not get selected at the 111 and then at the 112. So now I'm talking to the person at 201 who doesn't take RJ Harvey, and then it's like 202. I'm like, man, what is can I please get RJ Harvey? And it eventually gets to the point where a new person in the league, right, is trying to trade away RJ Harvey. And he ends up putting me and the person who ends up acquiring RJ Harvey literally in a bidding contest. So when he continues to talk about that, I'm like, you know what? Two things. One, I almost need to call his bluff in a way. And I'm not saying he is bluffing, but I need to almost know, right? I need to have this kind of a thing because what I didn't want to do was continue to bid against myself in this scenario. So, and he wasn't bluffing, by the way. Trade went through on the other end for RJ Harvey. And RJ Harvey went to the person that won the league. So there was that end of it. But he was being diligent, right? He was making sure going out and seeking the people that are coming to RJ Harvey, like, basically, can I get a first? Okay, can I get more? He ended up selling RJ Harvey. So now at this point, sticking with that is a part of the theme I wanted to discuss. But then also now I don't have my running back 2 solution, so to speak. I don't need to have a solution per se, but I think it's important thinking about the dynamics of this league. Like, do I really want to have Charbonnet or Najee Harris? Like 2 guys that are, I think, definitely the second option on their team in my RB2 spot. Like, not really. Mm-hmm. But then also when you look at this league, most of the people are trying to contend, which makes it interesting and a different dynamic when you're trying to go buy a running back for like liquid draft capital, let's say. But my team is Caleb Williams, and then I have Jahmyr Gibbs at running back. My running back 2 spot was between, again, Charbonnet and Najee. Malik Neighbors, JSN, Garrett Wilson, DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, Chris Godwin. So I have you have to start 5, and I have you can start up to 5. I'm sorry. There's 3 receivers. You can start up to 5. I have 6 really good ones that I feel good about. I have Andrews, then I have JJ McCarthy and Dak Prescott. So, like, really, this running back 2 spot is one that I feel like as a whole I would like to upgrade. I get an offer in from somebody, Tony Pollard, for a second, okay? And I'm like, man, I don't really like buying running backs of this type in the summer. Mm-hmm. But I'm also thinking, like, that's just intriguing enough of a deal that, like, I think it's worth it potentially, right? I'm not 100% sure. But what I like to do, my first, which people have coined the ATM at this point, right? What I like to do is instead of sending a counter, I leave that deal open, right? And I send a new offer, which can act almost as a counter, right? So I add in a piece. I was asking for something really light. It was Kyle Manon guy, right? So I like, see, can I get Kyle Manon guy thrown into the deal, right? And he ends up declining that. The other offer is still sitting there open. So now I'm like, all right. I need to go through everyone in the league and just make sure, is there a better option that I can send my second away, right? This is my 26 second. Can I send my 26 second away to anyone else in the league that's going to be slightly better in my estimation than Tony Pollard? Go through, and I basically wasn't able to identify that was going to be the case. All right, you know what, man? Let's go ahead and put this trade through for Tony Pollard. It fits what I need to do, right, or what I'm trying to do. It makes sense market-wise. And this is a new manager in the league that I can now have rapport with in the future for trading. So I think the diligence sometimes is not talked about, where if I'm just in a discussion with one person back and forth counters, like, you may just decide to hit, all right, this is close enough. Let's hit the accept button. I'm not saying you can't do that, but before you do that, maybe go through all of your league mates and make sure that there's not a better opportunity out there for you.
I 100% agree. And I feel like that's something in Dynasty that we don't talk about enough or don't do enough, but like we do it in every other aspect of our lives, right? Like, let's say you need a brand new TV. Are you just going to go right to Best Buy and just say that one? And you just that's the first one I saw. That's the first one I'm buying. Or like,
yeah, bring it home. Let's take it home. Yeah,
let's go. I don't even know what the price is. It was like $1,500 or something like that. But it was the first one I saw. But it's like, you're, of course, whenever you need a new TV, you're gonna price shop. You're gonna look at Target and Walmart. You're gonna look at Best Buy. You're gonna look at Amazon. You're gonna, well, what type do I need? A full OLED? Do I need, 84 inch or 96 inch, or can I get away with like a 55 inch, or like all these little different things. And I feel like Dynasty is the exact same way where, again, that's where I go back to, I'm just looking for types of players. I'm not looking for a player specifically. I'm looking for, you need an RB2. That's all you need. There's like a dozen guys that could literally be an RB2 for you and have like zero difference in point per game production. It could be Pollard or Connor or Montgomery or Kamara or Mixon, or maybe it's Aaron Jones, or, there's so many people that you could have that fill in that spot. What
Yeah,
is
archetypes,
the
man. Archetypes is very important, I think, to think
that's
about, at least on the strategic side. It's not that you can't fully buy into a player, endorse a player, and think that, Pollard is different than that guy. But
Mhm.
if you're thinking about cost and relative cost, pairing them in archetypes is huge. I fully agree. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. That's basically what I was just trying to say. Like, if whoever can get the job done, not going to say necessarily like at the cheapest, because sometimes, the cheaper players are cheap for a reason. So maybe you do want to pay a little bit more to have a little bit more longevity, especially if it's at the running back position or maybe at the wide receiver position or something like that. Or so it's not to say that necessarily you have to go for the cheapest guy every single time, but just because you're looking for a certain type of player or a certain position to fill a need in your starting lineup, it doesn't necessarily mean that you got to go take the first one that comes your way.
Yeah, and honestly, it's funny because my brain's kind of sitting here with the TV reference, and I actually wanted to kind of give another parallel to that with the same scenario where at that point I made the trade where I got Tony Pollard for a second. And I think sometimes, right, when you're especially going to go purchase something and when you're trading in Dynasty, we can get really fixated on like having, well, I don't want to get Tony Pollard. Let's say, but basically for me, there was all these different TVs. I could go talk about bringing JJ McCarthy or a Dak Prescott or one of my extra quarterbacks that I might have, right? I could bring my first into the mix. I can go get a nicer TV. But for me, this was kind of a scenario where, you know what, I'm going to leave the store only spending this 20 in my pocket, right? Or whatever it would be. I'm
What
gonna
your
spend
TV,
two.
dude?
Yeah. Well, let's say a couple $100 because 20
Right.
bucks TV is. Let's say I'm only looking to spend like 250 on the TV, right? I'm looking to spend something, but I don't want to go spend $1,000 on the TV right now. Now, here's the thing: I still have that money in a first or in the quarterbacks, right? I think that's another thing where for me with the reason I made that trade, and when you're going to make purchases, thinking about like, all right, is this like fiscally responsible? Should I right now mortgage everything I have in my excess to put it into my RB2 spot? And I mean, sure, if I bring a first and I bring, a JJ McCarthy to the table, you probably can go get a legit running back. But then what happens if somebody gets hurt? What happens if you need that money later on, right? I think for me, sometimes that's where at the moment I was basically making a temporary purchase on a TV to get the job done. And if something happens to it or I find out it really sucks, I still have money to go invest into something into the season. But I think sometimes to think about it from that standpoint, and when you're trying to, negotiate, like if you only got $200 budget on TV, you're going to have to start looking around all the stores. Best Buy might not have one. Maybe you got to go over to Amazon, and maybe Amazon doesn't have one. Maybe you got to go to what do you call it, Facebook Marketplace or whatever the hell you got to do to get the TV that you want. I think that's kind of the thing, is shopping it out. You don't just go buy the first one.
Right. And have lower expectations for what you might get back as well. Because I do agree with you. Like, it is like, instead of just saying I need an RB2, people could just say I need a running back, and you're looking at yourself, you're like, man, wouldn't it be really fun if I had Bijan Robinson? Wouldn't it be really fun if I had Jahmyr Gibbs? Like, and then you start crafting, you start looking at their rosters, and you start trying to figure out if you can craft the deal to get a Bijan Robinson, because you need a running back, but you don't actually need every running back or the best running back. You just need a running back. And again, maybe, hey, I don't really love Tony Pollard. That's totally fine. But, is it Chuba Hubbard? Is it Alvin Kamara? Is it, if you want to spend a little bit more, maybe you can get like a Josh Jacobs or somebody, or Derrick Henry just signed a contract extension. Can you go get one of those guys? Like,
yeah,
I get that. And this is where it all kind of goes back to, at the very beginning when we were talking about like how to kind of start a trade is identifying those players, identifying which players those rosters are whose rosters those players are on, trying to then filter down those rosters to see who's best to fit your needs versus their needs, and what you have to give versus what they're going to give you. And then you can kind of filter down the rosters from there, send out some offers, send out some, DMs or anything like that, however you go for it. and then just kind of get the ball rolling. You aim for the green, not the pin, wide target, and then just in my experience, those have been the best ways to get deals done, and it does really stem back to the fact that I am looking for a type, an archetype. I am kind of doing my diligence and shopping around versus just saying, I really want X and I'm going to go buy X, whatever it takes. That can sometimes lead to you overpaying or lead to a deal not getting done at all. Then, like you said, you're kind of left wanting or feel like, you were going to get something done, then you have never actually got anything done.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely, man. Yeah, I think, listen, this was a really good discussion, Addison. I appreciate you hopping on. And I always love, at least for me, I love when I'm seeing people that make content and play the game, and I can tell they play the game based on the content that they make, trying to have actionable discussion for people that ultimately, when you're creating content, right? If I'm creating a piece of content, I don't have people watching it. The whole thing is irrelevant. So trying to think about how I can get, more content out to the people that play the game and talking about things that are going to help people play the game. Because the whole reason I got into this is because I love playing the game of Dynasty. And it's always, to me, when I'm watching content, like I can tell this person is playing the game. I love having collaborations with people that share the same love that I do. I didn't even know before we got on here, golf would be one of those things too, which there's probably plenty of other things as well. But yeah, because part of it for me is I love when I make content, trying to help people think and further improve the way that they play the game and myself. And
absolutely,
honestly, man, a lot of that is just having discussions, which kind of make me think outside the box, right? Have people on that also play the game and they bring their own unique perspective to it. And you take, at least for me, how I've gotten to this point is taking pieces that I've learned from other people and trying to implement and incorporate those into my process. So Addison, man, really appreciate you hopping on and sharing your time and part of your process to the shitheads. And I think I already let them know, but let them know where they can find you, Addison Hayes, at, man.
Yeah, at Hayes _ on Twitter, X. I still call it Twitter.
I'll always forever do that too. Call it Twitter and say X after.
Yep. At Hayes _ on there, and then the DLF YouTube channel. That's pretty much it. All this kind of, there's strategy, there's theory, there's actionable, like, go actually buy these types of players or sell these kind of players, all that kind of good Dynasty content that I do strive to have my content be like what you said, where you can be actionable. It could be something that is actually, meaningful, or something that somebody can kind of digest and learn from, and then grow their own process, grow their own game, and do all that kind of stuff. Because I don't want to be the guy that just straight up tells you what to do. I want to be the guy that can inspire you to then think for yourself and be able to do things. There's nothing that makes me happier than whenever I receive a DM, and instead of that DM saying, "Hey, what do you think of this trade? Should I do this trade?" And it's like an obvious yes, that you should do that trade. But it's like, hey, I made this deal because I really like what's going on. Here's a little bit of my thinking behind why I took this deal. What do you think about it? I love those kind of trade or those DMs a lot more of this is what I'm coming into the table with. Do you want to back it up, or do you want to, talk me off the ledge or anything like that? So that's the kind of content that I try to make on the DLF YouTube channel. And I know that your content is very similar as well. So I'm glad that we were able to chop it up together and go through this. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much, man, for having me on.
Absolutely, man. And if there's anything, on DLF or any other place that you're on that I could help out or come collab with you too, always happy to do that, man. So invitation here, open at any time as well. South Harmon shitheads, make sure you go check out the DLF channel, as if you're already not. If you are not, please go check out Addison Hayes over there, and we will see you back. Going to be probably bringing some other people on, trying to get some other thoughts into the chamber, so to speak, and just push the limits for us when we're thinking about the game of Dynasty. Love you. We'll see you next time. We're out of here. Peace.